White cop lies about black man in court, not knowing he's a high-ranking Navy SEAL. The piercing fluorescent lights of courtroom 14 cast a harsh glow over the proceedings. Judge Eleanor Bennett, with 30 years of experience etched into the lines of her face, surveyed the room with practiced neutrality. The gallery was packed reporters from local papers, curious law students, and community members drawn by the increasingly contentious case. At the defense table sat Marcus Jackson, his posture military straight, despite the gravity of the situation. At 42, his athletic frame was maintained by decades of disciplined training, though few in the courtroom knew the extent of that training. He wore a simple charcoal suit that couldn't quite conceal his powerful build. His expression remained impassive, revealing nothing of his thoughts as he observed the proceedings. Across the aisle, Assistant District Attorney Vernon Walsh shuffled through papers with theatrical confidence. The prosecution's case rested almost entirely on the testimony of Officer Bradley Simmons, a 5-year veteran of the Westlake Police Department, who now took the stand. Simmons, with close-cropped blonde hair and a chest puffed with self-importance, was sworn in. Officer Simmons. Walsh began, "Please tell the court about your encounter with the defendant on the evening of March the 17th. Simmons leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I was on routine patrol in the Oakwood neighborhood when I observed a suspicious male, the defendant, walking near the community center around 10:30 p.m. His voice carried the rehearsed cadence of someone who had testified many times before. The center had reported break-ins recently, so I stopped to question him. When I approached and asked for identification, he immediately became agitated and confrontational." Marcus's attorney, Diana Rodriguez, a former public defender known for taking on police misconduct cases, made a small note without interrupting what happened next. Walsh prompted. "I explained that I needed to see his ID, and he started arguing, saying I had no right to stop him. His body language became increasingly threatening." Simmons shifted in his seat, playing up his discomfort at the memory. "When I attempted to detain him for further questioning, he shoved me backward and took a fighting stance." Marcus's face remained unchanged, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "So, you're testifying that the defendant initiated physical contact?" Walsh clarified, "Absolutely. I was forced to defend myself and effect an arrest for assaulting a police officer." "And did the defendant say anything during this altercation?" Simmons nodded gravely. "He was belligerent, saying things like, 'You picked the wrong person to mess with, and you don't know who I am.' I took these as threats to my safety." From the gallery came a barely audible scoff. Judge Bennett's gavel came down once in warning. "Did you feel your life was in danger, Officer Simmons?" Walsh asked. "Yes, sir. The defendant is clearly physically capable, and his aggressive manner made me fear for my safety. In my professional opinion, he was preparing to escalate the situation further when my backup arrived." Walsh nodded, satisfied. "No further questions." "Your Honor," Judge Bennett turned to the defense table. "Your witness, Counselor Diana Rodriguez, approached the stand with unhurried confidence. At 53, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had seen courtroom theatrics come and go and remained unimpressed. Officer Simmons, you testified that my client became agitated and confrontational when you approached him. Could you describe exactly what he did that you interpreted as agitation?" Simmons shifted again, His body tensed up. He kept looking around like he was planning something. Looking around? You mean he was observing his surroundings? In a suspicious manner? Yes. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. And this suspicious manner, is that something they teach you to identify at the police academy? Or is that your personal interpretation? Objection. Walsh called argumentative. I'll rephrase. Rodriguez said smoothly, Officer Simmons, did Mr. Jackson raise his voice during this encounter? Yes, he was yelling. We'll get to specific statements later. For now, just answer the question as asked. Did he raise his voice? Simmons hesitated. Not exactly, no. Did he use profanity or insulting language toward you? No, but his tone was disrespectful. I see, and when you claim he shoved, you demonstrate the motion he made. Simmons showed a pushing motion with both hands, so both hands were used in this alleged shove. Yes, that's correct. Rodriguez nodded, making a note. Officer Simmons, were you wearing your body camera during this encounter? The question hung in the air. Simmons's confident demeanor faltered slightly. The camera malfunctioned that evening. How convenient, Rodriguez remarked. No further questions at this time, but we reserve the right to recall the officer. As she returned to her seat, Marcus leaned over and whispered something. Rodriguez nodded, once her expression unchanged. The prosecution called 2 more officers who had arrived as backup, both corroborating Simmons' account while carefully noting they had not witnessed the initial altercation. Throughout their testimony, Marcus remained still, his eyes tracking each witness with the focused attention of someone cataloging inconsistencies. When the judge called for the lunch recess, reporters rushed from the courtroom to file updates on what was shaping up to be a case that pitted the word of a decorated officer against an African-American man charged with assaulting him, a narrative all too familiar in communities across the country. What none of them yet realized was that this particular story was about to take an unexpected turn. In a private conference room adjacent to the courtroom, Marcus Jackson finally spoke. His voice was calm and measured, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having his words heeded in high-stakes situations. They're building a narrative based entirely on Simmons's testimony, he observed. Nothing from the 2 backup officers contradicts it, because they arrived after the alleged assault. Diana Rodriguez spread photographs from the arrest scene across the table. Simmons claimed you shoved him with both hands, yet he didn't activate his body cam until after backup arrived. Convenient, not surprising, Marcus replied. He knew exactly what he was doing. Rodriguez studied her client. Marcus Jackson had been unlike any defendant she'd represented in her 25-year career. When he'd first approached her firm, he'd laid out the facts with precision, presenting a timeline with supporting documentation for his whereabouts before and after the encounter. He spoke like someone giving a mission briefing, not a man facing charges that could destroy his life and career. The prosecution has a weak case. She said, it's essentially Simmons's word against yours. But you and I both know how these cases typically play out when it's an officer's testimony versus a civilian's, especially when the civilian looks like me. Marcus finished matter-of-factly. I'm aware of the statistical realities. Counselor Rodriguez nodded, appreciating his directness. We need to undermine Simmons's credibility. The inconsistencies in his testimony are a start, but we need more. It's coming. Marcus said, his confidence unwavering. "Lieutenant Commander Santiago will be in court this afternoon." "Your superior officer," Rodriguez asked, though she knew the answer. Marcus had provided a comprehensive list of character witnesses from his military career, but had been selective about which ones to call. "Yes, and he's bringing something that should interest you." For the first time since the trial began, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Simmons made a critical error. He chose the wrong person to target, and more importantly, the wrong community center to do it near. Before Rodriguez could press for details, there was a knock at the door. A paralegal entered, carrying a USB drive. "This just arrived for you, Miss Rodriguez," the courier said. "It's from a Commander Santiago." Rodriguez took the drive, her curiosity piqued. "Let's see what your commander has brought us." She connected the drive to her laptop, and together they watched footage from what appeared to be a security camera. The timestamp showed 10:27 p.m. on March 17th, precisely when the interaction with Officer Simmons had occurred. As the silent footage played, Rodriguez's eyes widened. "This changes everything." Marcus nodded, his expression one of vindication rather than surprise. Simmons didn't realize the community center had upgraded its security system last month. The new cameras cover the entire perimeter, including the sidewalk where he stopped me. The footage clearly showed Marcus walking past the community center, then Simmons's patrol car pulling up sharply. The officer approached Marcus with his hand already on his weapon. There was no audio, but the body language told a story dramatically different from Simmons's testimony. Marcus stood with his hands visible, maintaining a non-threatening posture throughout the conversation. When Simmons stepped into his personal space, Marcus took a single step back. There was no shove, no aggressive stance. Most damning was the moment when Simmons clearly grabbed Marcus's arm and spun him around, pushing him against the patrol car while reaching for his handcuffs. At no point did Marcus push or shove the officer. "Why didn't you tell me about this footage earlier?" Rodriguez asked, though her tone held more admiration than reproach. "I wasn't certain it existed until yesterday. The community center's director is a veteran Navy like me. When I explained the situation, he reviewed their security footage. The system automatically archives after 2 weeks, so it was almost lost." Rodriguez began preparing notes for her cross-examination. "This is textbook police misconduct." Simmons lied under oath about the entire encounter. "The question is why?" Marcus said thoughtfully. "Why target me specifically? Random harassment is one thing, but filing false charges takes this to another level. Some officers target people they think won't or can't fight back," Rodriguez suggested, "or who won't be believed if they do." Marcus nodded. He assumed I was just some black guy in the wrong neighborhood. No connections, no resources, no credibility. Against a police officer's word. "His mistake," Rodriguez said, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. Marcus's expression remained serious, one that almost worked. "If not for that security camera, it would be my word against his, and we both know which way that usually goes." As they prepared to return to court, Rodriguez studied her client with renewed appreciation. Throughout the case, Marcus had maintained a strategic patience that she now recognized from her other military clients, the capacity to withhold action until the optimal moment presented itself. He had waited for concrete evidence rather than simply protesting his innocence. "We'll introduce the video this afternoon," she decided. "Then I want you to testify. The jury needs to hear from you directly." Marcus nodded once resolute. "I'm ready." The afternoon session began with Officer Simmons still on the stand. Judge Bennett reminded him that he remained under oath as Diana Rodriguez approached for continued cross-examination. "Officer Simmons," she began, her voice carrying a new edge of confidence, "I'd like to revisit your testimony about the events of March 17th. You stated under oath that Mr. Jackson shoved you with both hands when you attempted to detain him for questioning, correct?" "That's correct." Simmons affirmed, his posture slightly more rigid than during his morning testimony. "And you testified that Mr. Jackson was belligerent and threatening throughout the encounter." "Yes, that's accurate." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit D security footage from the Oakwood Community Center captured on the evening in question." ADA Walsh was immediately on his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This evidence wasn't shared during discovery." "Your Honor, this footage was only obtained yesterday afternoon," Rodriguez countered. "We provided copies to the prosecution first thing this morning in accordance with rules for newly discovered evidence." Judge Bennett fixed her gaze on Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, did you receive this evidence this morning?" Walsh shifted uncomfortably. "We did, Your Honor, but we haven't had adequate time to review it. The footage is less than 5 minutes long. Counselor, I'm sure you could have found the time." Judge Bennett turned to Rodriguez. "You may proceed with Exhibit D." As the court clerk prepared the video, Simmons's confident expression began to falter. The large monitor facing the courtroom displayed the security footage Rodriguez and Marcus had reviewed earlier, the clear, high-definition evidence that contradicted every substantive claim in Simmons's testimony. A subtle murmur grew in the gallery as the silent footage played. Judge Bennett made no move to silence it, her own attention fixed on the screen. When the video ended, the courtroom remained unusually quiet, the impact of what they'd witnessed settling over the space. Rodriguez turned back to Simmons. "Officer, having seen this footage, would you like to revise your testimony about Mr. Jackson shoving you?" Simmons' face had paled considerably. The camera angle might not show everything that happened. The camera shows the entire interaction from multiple angles. "Officer Simmons, it clearly shows you grabbing Mr. Jackson and pushing him against your patrol car after a conversation in which he displayed no aggressive behavior whatsoever." Rodriguez's voice remained calm but carried throughout the courtroom. "Were you lying under oath this morning, or are you lying now?" "Objection," Walsh called. "Counsel is badgering the witness." "Sustained," Judge Bennett ruled, though her expression had hardened as she regarded Simmons. "Rephrase, Counselor." "Officer Simmons, does the video we just watched accurately depict your interaction with Mr. Jackson on March 17th? After a long pause, Simmons answered, "It shows part of the interaction, yes." "Which part does it not show?" "The part where Mr. Jackson supposedly shoved you with both hands." "Because the footage covers the entire encounter from the moment you pulled up until backup arrived, and at no point does Mr. Jackson make any aggressive movement toward you." Simmons glanced toward the prosecution table, but Walsh studiously avoided his gaze. "I perceived his movements as threatening based on my training and experience." Simmons insisted, his voice no longer carrying the certainty of his morning testimony. "Your Honor," Rodriguez said, "given the clear contradiction between Officer Simmons's sworn testimony and the objective evidence, the defense moves to strike his testimony from the record and requests that the court consider referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential perjury charges. Before Judge Bennett could respond, Walsh stood, "Your Honor, the state requests a brief recess to confer with the witness." Denied, Mr. Walsh. Officer Simmons is in the middle of cross-examination. The judge's tone brooked no argument. Ms. Rodriguez, continue. "No further questions for this witness. Your Honor, the video speaks for itself." Rodriguez returned to the defense table, sharing a brief glance with Marcus, whose expression remained composed despite the significant turn in their favor. The defense calls Marcus Jackson, Rodriguez announced. As Marcus rose and moved toward the witness stand, his bearing communicated a quiet dignity. He was sworn in his deep voice, carrying clearly as he promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. "Mr. Jackson," Rodriguez began, "could you please tell the court about yourself?" Marcus sat perfectly straight, hands resting lightly on his thighs. "My name is Marcus Jackson. I'm 42 years old. I've served in the United States Navy for the past 22 years, currently holding the rank of Lieutenant Commander in the Naval Special Warfare Command." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Officer Simmons, still seated in the gallery, after his testimony, visibly stiffened. "Could you elaborate on your military service for the court?" Rodriguez asked. "I've been a Navy SEAL for 19 years, serving in various capacities, including as team leader for specialized operations. I've completed 7 overseas deployments and currently serve as an instructor and operations coordinator at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center." The courtroom had gone completely silent. Many eyes turned toward Officer Simmons, whose face had drained of color. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, were you in uniform on the evening of March 17th when Officer Simmons stopped you?" "No, I was in civilian clothes, jeans, and a dark jacket. I had been at the Oakwood Community Center meeting with the director about a youth mentorship program we're developing for at-risk teenagers in the area." "And why were you at the community center at 10:30 at night?" "The director, James Ramirez, is a retired Navy veteran. Our scheduled meeting ran late because we were discussing funding options, and I was walking to my car when Officer Simmons stopped me." "Can you tell the court in your own words what happened during that encounter?" Marcus nodded once. "Officer Simmons pulled his patrol car alongside me and immediately asked what I was doing in the neighborhood. I explained that I had been at the community center for a meeting. He demanded identification, and I asked if there was a specific reason I was being stopped. Were you agitated or confrontational, as Officer Simmons claimed? No, I remained calm and professional. Throughout the interaction, I'm trained to de-escalate tense situations, not escalate them. Did you at any point shove Officer Simmons as he testified under oath? No, I did not initiate any physical contact whatsoever. As the video clearly shows, Officer Simmons grabbed my arm, spun me around, and pushed me against his patrol car without provocation. Why do you think Officer Simmons stopped you that night? Ada Walsh stood quickly. Objection calls for speculation. Your Honor, the defendant's perception of the encounter is relevant to his state of mind. Rodriguez countered, I'll allow it. Judge Bennett ruled the witness may answer. Marcus met the judge's eyes directly. Based on my experience and the nature of the interaction, I believe Officer Simmons stopped me because I was a black man walking alone at night in a predominantly white neighborhood. He made assumptions about who I was and what I was doing there, and those assumptions led to his aggressive approach. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, why didn't you immediately identify yourself as a Navy SEAL when Officer Simmons approached you? Marcus's expression remained composed, but his eyes conveyed the weight of his answer. Because I shouldn't have to. My rights as a citizen don't depend on my military service or rank. I'm entitled to the same respect and due process as any other American. The fact that I've served this country for over 2 decades doesn't make me more deserving of fair treatment than anyone else who might have been walking down that street. A profound silence fell over the courtroom. Even Judge Bennett seemed moved by the simple dignity of his response. "No further questions, Your Honor," Rodriguez said, quietly. Returning to her seat, ADA Walsh approached for cross-examination, his earlier confidence notably diminished. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, did you show Officer Simmons your identification when he requested it?" I asked him why I was being stopped. When he couldn't articulate a specific reason, I expressed concern about the basis for the stop. Before I could decide whether to provide ID, he had already escalated to physical detention. But you didn't immediately comply with his request for identification. I exercised my right to understand why I was being detained. Counselor, the Fourth Amendment protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures. Officer Simmons had no probable cause and could articulate no reasonable suspicion for stopping me. Walsh shifted strategy. "You mentioned your extensive military training. With your background, couldn't Officer Simmons have reasonably perceived you as a potential threat?" Marcus's expression didn't change, but his gaze intensified. Officer Simmons had no knowledge of my military background during our encounter. More importantly, I demonstrated no threatening behavior whatsoever. As the video clearly shows, I kept my hands visible at all times and maintained a non-aggressive posture throughout. Walsh persisted, increasingly desperate to salvage something from the crumbling case. "Isn't it possible that from Officer Simmons's perspective, your calm demeanor could have been interpreted as unusual under the circumstances?" "No, Counselor. It is not reasonable to interpret calm compliance as threatening. That logic would make it impossible for someone in my position to respond appropriately. If I show emotion, I'm aggressive. If I remain calm, I'm suspiciously calm." The officer created a no-win situation by approaching me with bias from the outset. After several more failed attempts to undermine Marcus's testimony, Walsh finally surrendered. "No further questions, Your Honor." As Marcus returned to the defense table, his testimony hung in the air, not just his account of that night, but the powerful statement about citizenship and equal treatment under the law regardless of status or service. Judge Bennett addressed the jury. "We'll hear closing arguments tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. As people filed out of the courtroom, Officer Simmons slipped away quickly. Avoiding eye contact with anyone, Marcus remained seated at the defense table, receiving quiet congratulations from Rodriguez on his testimony. What neither of them immediately noticed was a young black boy about 12 years old who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom with his mother. As they gathered their belongings, the boy approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice barely audible above the shuffle of the departing crowd. "Are you really a Navy SEAL?" Marcus turned, his serious expression softening as he met the boy's eyes. "I am." "That's so cool. The boy said, awe evident in his voice, "My mom brought me here for my social studies project. I want to join the Navy someday, too." "It's a worthy goal," Marcus replied, crouching slightly to be at eye level with the boy. "What's your name?" "Darius, sir." "Well, Darius, it takes hard work and dedication, but more importantly, it takes integrity. Standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult." The boy nodded solemnly, then asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "Were you scared when the police officer lied about you?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I wasn't scared, Darius. I was disappointed, but I believed that the truth would eventually come out if I remained calm and fought the right way through the system with evidence and dignity." Darius's mother, who had approached behind her son, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Thank you for setting that example, Lieutenant Commander. It means more than you know for him to see someone like you standing up for the truth and winning." Marcus nodded his acknowledgement, recognizing the deeper meaning behind her words. As they walked away, he reflected on the unexpected impact his case might have beyond his own circumstances, a reminder of why the fight for justice mattered regardless of one's rank or status. The following morning, Courtroom 14 was filled beyond capacity. Word had spread about the previous day's dramatic revelations, drawing a crowd that included not only the usual spectators and reporters, but also several naval officers in uniform there to support their colleague. Marcus sat at the defense table in his Navy dress uniform, the rows of ribbons and medals on his chest, telling a story of extraordinary service that most civilians could scarcely comprehend. It was the first time during the trial he had worn his uniform, a deliberate choice saved for this final day. The prosecution table was noticeably different. Ada Walsh had been replaced by District Attorney Harrison Mills himself, a clear indication of how seriously the prosecutor's office was now taking the case. Officer Simmons was conspicuously absent from the courtroom. Judge Bennett called the court to order, and both sides presented their closing arguments. Mills, recognizing the hopelessness of pursuing the original charges, focused on minimizing the damage to his office's reputation, emphasizing that the system was working as intended by bringing the truth to light. Rodriguez, in her closing, was direct and powerful. What happened to Lieutenant Commander Jackson could have happened to any citizen walking down that street that night. The only difference is that most wouldn't have had the resources, the composure, or the corroborating evidence to fight back against a false accusation. This case isn't just about clearing an innocent man, it's about holding our system accountable when it fails to provide equal justice under the law. The jury deliberated for less than 30 minutes before returning with their verdict. On the charge of assaulting a police officer, we find the defendant Marcus Jackson not guilty. A murmur of approval ran through the courtroom. Judge Bennett called for order, then addressed the jury. "Thank you for your service. You are dismissed." She turned to Marcus. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, you are free to go. This court apologizes for the ordeal you have endured." As Marcus rose, Judge Bennett continued, her voice carrying unusual emotion. "I will be referring this matter to the District Attorney's Internal Affairs Division for a full investigation into Officer Simmons's conduct, both during the arrest and in his testimony before this court. Mr. Mills, I trust your office will handle this with the seriousness it deserves." Mills nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor. We've already placed Officer Simmons on administrative leave pending a full investigation. After the judge departed, Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers, his fellow officers, community members who had followed the case, and even a few jurors who lingered to express their support. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus noticed Darius and his mother waiting patiently to one side. He made his way over to them. "Congratulations, sir." Darius said, his eyes wide as he took in Marcus's full-dress uniform with its impressive array of decorations. "Thank you, Darius. I appreciate you coming back today." The boy's mother extended her hand. "I wanted him to see this through to the end, for him to witness justice being served, especially in a case like this. It's an education no classroom could provide." Marcus nodded his understanding. It's important for him to see that the system can work, even if it sometimes needs to be pushed. "Sir," Darius said, his voice gaining confidence, "my teacher wants me to write about what I learned from observing the trial. Would it be okay if I interviewed you sometime for my report?" Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he had allowed himself since the ordeal began. "I think that could be arranged." He reached into his pocket and handed his card to Darius's mother. "Have your mom contact me, and we'll set something up." As they parted ways, Rodriguez joined Marcus, watching the boy and his mother leave the courtroom. "You've made quite an impression. One I hope lasts." Marcus replied, "That young man is exactly why this case matters beyond my personal vindication." Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters awaited. Marcus had declined all interview requests throughout the trial. But now, with the verdict rendered, he decided to make a brief statement. Standing on the courthouse steps, his bearing dignified in his naval uniform, Marcus addressed the gathered press. "Today, justice was served not just for me, but for the principles our legal system is meant to uphold. What happened to me is not unique. False charges and misrepresentations occur far too often, particularly against people of color. The difference in my case was the presence of irrefutable evidence and the resources to mount an effective defense." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled cameras. "My military service did not make me more deserving of justice than any other citizen. Every American has the right to fair treatment under the law, regardless of their rank, status, or background. I hope my case will serve as a reminder that the truth matters, that accountability applies to everyone, and that standing firm against injustice is both a right and a responsibility." As Marcus concluded his statement and declined further questions, he caught sight of Darius standing at the edge of the crowd, watching with undisguised admiration. The boy offered a small salute, which Marcus returned with perfect military precision and a subtle nod of acknowledgement. One generation of service to another, a quiet promise that the ideals they both believed in were worth defending on battlefields abroad and in courtrooms at home. In that moment, Marcus understood that his ordeal had served a purpose beyond his own vindication. It had become a testament to the ongoing struggle for equal justice, a reminder that the fight for truth required vigilance from all who believed in it, and perhaps, most importantly, an inspiration to a young boy who now saw firsthand that dignity and persistence could prevail against even the most entrenched systems of power. As he descended the courthouse steps, a free man, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Jackson, carried with him not just his own victory, but the weight of its meaning for all those who watched and wondered if justice was truly possible for everyone in America, regardless of who they were or what uniform they wore.